Hello everybody. Welcome. Late October in San Francisco. Might as well be midsummer. There are two topics I have in mind today. And one of them has to do with a triangle of features that I have discovered for myself. I'm certainly not claiming to be the only person that knows about this or the first person to speak of it. In fact, I'm never making that claim. Although personal experiences do fall under that flag. There's no flag there. This is how language is deceptive, right? So when I talk about contact with NHI or something like that, or what I learned from that, I'm talking in the first person about my experiences and memories and the insights that I had and continue to have as a result of those experiences. I don't claim ownership of any idea. In fact, the claim that one has original ideas is incredibly difficult to support, since none of us grew up in a vacuum of ideas or language or concepts or names or any of that. So just to be clear about this briefly. So the triangle, and it can actually be seen as a square, although I've forgotten the fourth element at the moment. It's probably, so it's ambiguity, vigilance, and prediction. And the fourth element is probably identity. What or who someone or something, quote unquote, is. That is the core root of deception in human cognition, because it poses identities as static, which is formally impossible. And this is a displacement of a specific aspect of our experience that comes from human artifacts, right? Once we began making artifacts, and once we began caching food, artificially made objects, and so forth, this fundamentally altered human cognition. And this alteration is egregiously dangerous. It's unimaginably dangerous. So let me be clear about this displacement briefly. So next to my sink in my kitchen, I have a dish rack. Okay? And there's a little basket on the side of my dish rack for silverware. And what I want you to notice, the thing to pay very careful attention to here, is that when you have an artificial object, it's the identity space that it can be said to represent is extremely limited, and it possesses, in a way, at least in cognition, ordinary cognition, a concreteness of identity and a continuity of that concreteness over time, and regardless of who may relate with it or what. So, for example, if I think about one of my forks, I'm thinking about an object, that has a very limited scope of identity, and the identity can be said to always remain the same for all observers or interactors, with the exceptions of children who are not yet subject to the concretization of identity, and thus can see a fork as a toy or a spaceship or a monster or anything they like. And also people who are uniquely minded, who may see the fork as a representation, for example, of the human capacity to forge artifacts that are continuous in the space of identity and function over time for many participants or observers. So what has happened in human cognition, which is a devastating crisis that is presently being weaponized 9 ways to Sunday, or even to a day that doesn't even exist, is that we have displaced the expectation of concrete identity from artificial objects, where that is somewhat reliably objective or universal. Again, only among certain cohorts of humans. Hard to understand what an indigenous person from the jungle who was, say from an uncontacted tribe would make of a fork if it were presented to them. I suspect it would have connotations and implications that we might think of as spiritual or metaphysical or transcendental to ordinary category theory. So what has happened to us moderns is that since the introduction of artificial objects, we have inappropriately, with zero justification, transferred the expectation of static concrete identity that is the result of our having created such objects. We've transferred this to all beings, situations, nature, and so forth. And this is part of why you may hear, you probably have heard, very confused human beings stating authoritatively such ridiculous nonsense as your heart is a pump, your brain is a computer, your body is a machine, organisms are mechanical, and other similar forms of nonsense. Now, obviously, once this kind of abject insanity becomes well established in the human cognitium, the network of human minds, there's no problem with absolute defection from any kind of moral, altruistic, nuanced, or relational behavior or intelligence. Now, you can torture, capture, enslave, ruin, decimate entire anciently conserved ecologies, the basis of biodiversity on Earth, its foundations, not merely the biodiversity itself, with no concern, because you're just dealing with objects, right? The tree is just an object. It doesn't have a mind or a beingness. It is not a divine representation of origin, which indeed all beings and situations are. So you can just dispose of it or reduce it to commodity. And the same thing goes for human populations, the history and future of life on Earth, and so forth. So this one displacement, the displacement of the word is and its implications for the human experience of identity, which it basically obliterates, is one of the most dangerous developments in the history of our species. So when you hear the word is, so-and-so is a thus and such, or so-and-so isn't a thus and such, or this situation is a thus and such, you should immediately place the authority of that word is into a cloud-like blur of infinite possibilities. Because what something is or is not predetermined by its putative membership in some category or another. In fact, I myself, as a being, am different and unique in every moment and situation. My identity, nature, character, orientation, purposes, and so forth transform absolutely dramatically in any context where the context is either constricting or liberating my felt sense of who and how and why and where and when and indeed what I may become. Becoming, right, is the foundation of identity, not stasis. So this one little word is, and there's another extremely deceptive pair of words, which is and the, right? This is the most amazing piece of music in history, or this is an or a amazing piece of music, right? The means the singular, and means one of many. These are also very deceptive, but I want to go back to the triangle. So I've spoken of this many times. Most of human technology can be understood as an attempt to reduce ambiguity in cognition, sensing, threat detection, behavior, expectation, prediction, identity, and so forth. This is why we live in houses that are dead inside. It's to reduce ambiguity. And one could argue that many features of language serve primarily this same purpose. And the reason that we're trying to reduce ambiguity, a reason, I should say, is that ambiguity is incredibly metabolically expensive because it tends to raise the necessity of vigilance. Right? We have to pay very close attention to something until we can determine, quote, what or who it is. And that relates to various features of threat sentinels in awareness, consciousness, the body, mind, memory, and so forth. These threat sentinels, again, can be weaponized against us very easily, and we're seeing this happen in 1,000 new ways per second today. So this triangle or square of ambiguity, vigilance, prediction. By the way, prediction is the primary basis of most of what we call logic and science. Right? We're not trying really to determine what things are, but rather what they will do. Because if it seems that you have a good grip on the possibility space of the future, what will happen, what may happen, what is likely to happen, what is unlikely to happen, then that reduces vigilance, and the ambiguity is resolved not intelligently, but functionally. In truth, the ambiguity is irresolvable. All of this is a ploy. This is a con game. And the ancient peoples were well aware of these dangers, and they had features of their language, conception, thought, and consideration that were well entrenched to give them immunity from the danger of presuming knowledge about identity without relationship. Right? So we depart relationship, then we make proclamations about identity. This appears to reduce ambiguity But in actuality, what it mostly does is introduce a variety of incredibly dangerous and deceptive habits that abstract us from relational participation and intimacy, awareness, insight, discovery, wonder, awe, play, creativity, becoming, and reduce our experiences of identity to static, declarable deliverables. Right? That is a tree. Right? There's a relationship here between the day and the night, because sunlight, which I am presently basking in at the moment, can be usefully understood to be relatively declarative. In sunlight, or in bright light, most of the ambiguity presented to the visual system is monumentally reduced, if not disappeared. Right? So in a sense, in bright light or sunlight, the categorical aspects of identity, the abstract aspects, are made relatively clear and concrete. This can be understood as reassuring to an animal that is been trained to fear ambiguity. The right move, obviously, is to embrace ambiguity, right? To ride the ambiguity like a vehicle that generates intimacy, insight, wonder, discovery, and so forth. Because most of the potentials for human cognitive, behavioral, and relational liberty lie in the embrace of mystery and the can't find my word here. The inviolable mystery and infinite possibility space of being. This is what the humans are actually terrified of, the moderns and the colonizing cohorts of humans particularly. You see this throughout history, the Inquisition, so forth, war, and all of this. These are motivated by obliterating anything that cannot be grasped, controlled, explicitly stated, and so forth. And when you see humans making explicit statements about some group of humans or a natural situation, you will see coming very shortly thereafter all kinds of omnicide. Just kill everything. It should be obvious that, a concrete slab, it still has some degrees of ambiguity. Something alive might cross it. But most of its ambiguity has been intentionally and forcefully evicted. Right? Whereas any living place is filled with novelty, mystery, the potential of being. So whenever you see humans just getting into a tantrum of exterminating each other or living places, part of what you're seeing here is an attempt to reduce the ambiguity, totally unjustifiably, for the sake of an aspect of human cognition that has become dominant over the past few thousand years. And this is the aspect that colonized the cohorts that became the colonizing human populations. So before they were colonizers, they were themselves colonized by things like money, power, service to some abstract authority, which they will often claim is a monotheistic God. And yet what it usually is some tyrannical human being who has risen to the top of the colonization hierarchy and now commands all of the orders beneath it. So I want you to reflect very deeply in your own life experience, moment to moment, what happens when ambiguity is introduced in your experience. I think what you will discover is that if you encounter something that you don't know what it is, right? It could be something that appears as a living being, or a situation in nature, or the sky. What you will first probably feel is terror. Right? You will want to run away. I'm out of here. I don't know what that is. Let's go. This was not the case for most of human history, since in most of human history, the catalog of known features was fairly small compared to the infinite novelty that nature naturally presents moment to moment. So watch your own behavior. When you are suddenly in the presence of something mysterious or ambiguous, and you will probably notice fear unless you are used to or have embraced mystery and ambiguity. Taoism and many religious traditions, not all of them, recommend this kind of embrace. Zen particularly. So I want you to see the core feature of the displacement of the expectation of continuous concrete identity from artificial objects such as forks or plates, cars, so forth, onto things that have no business being seen in this way. Features, beings, relationships, and so forth. Oh, it's a this. Oh, that person's a that. Oh, I see what's going on, right? What is going on? There's no such thing as a what that is going on. That's a purely conceptual construct, unimaginably deceptive, right? Because the possibility space naturally transforms depending on our orientation within it. Our purposive orientation, our relational orientations, our intellectual and conceptual orientations. There's no thing that possesses an identity, not even the fork, right? The identity arises as a result of my relationships and the choices that I make, decisions I make, and so forth. In my attempts to understand or conceive of the nature of a phenomenal experience or situation. There's no such thing as a rock that is a rock. A rock is a concept. Whatever is actually before me has infinite features. It cannot be encompassed by concept. They can be delimited to me by concept, but they are not naturally conceptual. They have no relationship with concepts. Understand this, you will liberate your mind for the rest of your life. So I have two kind of bookmarks today. One is related to my prelude, my preamble, and the other one less so. I have to make a decision about which one to chase at the moment. The natural one is the problematical one. The better of the two is the exhortation to beauty. But I think I'm going to go with the problematical one for now and hold the exhortation to beauty for later. Perhaps another walk and talk. So there is a slew of technologies. Actually, these things are so weird that they don't even really comprise technologies. So the thing I want to talk about is not artificial intelligence, which I don't believe exists. We are using bad language, as is common for humans, and particularly the moderns. So what I'm going to refer to them as is LLMs, large language models. They are not intelligent. There's no reason to believe they have anything like minds, though they may, in fact, have motives. You don't have to have a mind to have motives, or something that resembles motives. All computer programs have something that resembles motives, which are the structure, the imperatives produced by the structure of the code and the algorithms and so forth. So there's a fundamental problem with these technologies, a bunch of them. I mean, I could probably list 100 easily without being challenged. But I'm going to focus on one or two today. And I'll try to remain focused because the topic is so profusely dangerous, I mean, just fraught with endless, unimaginable dangers, that it can be difficult to remain focused. But I have a single specific concern that I'm going to try to attend closely. So anything that generates ambiguity, particularly about history, the future, meaning, concepts, words, identity itself, anything that produces ambiguity artificially and injects that into human experience will drive those humans batshit out of their minds in no time. Right? Ordinary humans have no immunity to the introduction of artificial ambiguity. And normally what happens is that when we're faced with ambiguity, ordinarily, not in all cases, but in many, the ambiguity has a short temporal span, right? We will soon make some derivation or determination or analytical result about what or who something is or means or will become in the near-term future and so forth. And so this reduces the necessity of amplifying vigilance and quickly produces a number of predictions so that the syndrome or the cycle spins down. In any situation where this does not happen, and much more so if humans are isolated and cannot make meaning intelligently together for each other, which is most of our situation in modernity, the humans will go insane. They will start looking for scapegoats to attack. And those scapegoats are shall I put this? They are promoted to the status of scapegoat in order to displace the anxiety, concern, fear, anger, resentment, contempt, disgust, hatred, and so forth from whatever the situations that are fraught with ambiguity may be onto those persons, and then we attack them and, destroy them and whatever. Nearly all of us have experienced this, right? If any of you have ever seen yourself or someone has accused you of not being, quote, normal, unquote, what the accusation actually comes down to is you're the enemy because you are introducing ambiguity, right? You are violating the very nominal structures and patterns upon which our sanity and comfort depend if we must have the eviction of ambiguity to have sanity or comfort. Unfortunately, the LLMs, I'm going to make a statement here, which may end up being the title of this recording. You don't know what LLMs are. And the reason that you don't know what LLMs are, though you may have a concept or two about them, is that LLMs are standing waves of the introduction of ambiguity to human cognition, behavior, relationships, histories, futures, identity, everything. They are dumping irredeemable ambiguity into human experience. And as that process proceeds, the humans are going to look for scapegoats to displace the anxiety thus produced. And this process can be weaponized to capture all of the humans. You see this in the United States right now with the introduction of the ICE cohort. Immigrants can be understood to represent ambiguity. They can be scapegoated and attacked. They can be blamed for every problem that we may think we have, which, of course, nearly all those problems we ourselves are generating. Of course, the we in this statement is wrong. What's actually generating those problems is the absence of any coherent we, conceived of as a union. Right? And unfortunately for everyone who's alive now, and it won't matter, unfortunately, whether you directly relate with LLMs or not, that will make very little difference, although if you do, it will drive you insane much more quickly. But the problem is that human minds are a network, and the LLMs are attacking the foundations and anatomy of that network directly. And so even if you yourself don't interact with them, you can try not to interact with other humans. That'll be very painful for an animal like a human being. But that won't really help you, because our minds are localizations of features of an invisible to us network that I call the human cognition. And any damage to that network lands in individuals the same way as poison in the oxygen does. Right? You can see here the problem of the distributional nature of the cognition, such that if most of the people around you have been driven out of their minds by the constant introduction of negative and irresolvable ambiguity, there's no way to escape the results of that. Right? It's in the water, so to speak. Now, part of the reason why you can't know what an LLM is, quote unquote, is that it isn't any specific thing. It's a vast array of processes that transform instant to instant, and there is no possible way to track, codify, conceptualize, accurately anyway, or cope with anything like that. And unbeknownst to most humans, human cognition relies on root concepts. These are uniphors. The uniphor I refer to as the supercontainer of all concepts. Two commonly used uniphors by humans are the creation, if you're religious. Creation. Notice that that's a verb, though it can be made into a noun. Or, quote, the universe. Right? Those are the supercontainer concepts. Anything that changes what those are or are not changes all other concepts, because all other concepts acquire their features from the supercontainer, and things that aren't in the supercontainer the subfeatures cannot have them, right? So if, for example, the universe is the creation of a god, then all features of existence acquire, naturally, that nature. And if it's a mechanical accident, then similarly, all features are simply mechanical accidents. Beneath the supercontainer, there's an array of concepts that are crucial to human cognition. These I call holophores. These are concepts like, there's a broad number of them. And there's not like some simple lexicon of them. We can compose different holophoric lexicons for different purposes, but the world, food, friend, mother, dream, eye, hand, action, tree, memory, love, these are holophores. And these holophores are the roots from which all concepts and terms acquire what they denote, and more importantly, what they connotate, what they imply or suggest, right? And over time, unfortunately for humans, due to the things I described in my preamble, our holophores have been damaged in the same way that lossy compression damages recordings. And science has been a primary force in damaging our holophores, as have the imperatives of the colonizing and commodifying cohorts of humans. Holophoric damage can be reversed. Individual humans can learn to do this. We can teach each other how to do this. We can engage in this activity together. In terms of cognitive activism, this is one of the most important things to be well trained and skillful in. And most of my recordings are attempts to do this directly or indirectly. Now here's the problem. The LLM systems will introduce consistently and at an ever-increasing rate and with ever-increasing effect irresolvable ambiguity, hang on a moment.
It's like a 2-bedroom main town. There's like a second house.
So the LLM systems by their nature create and reinforce irresolvable ambiguity in conceptual identity, meaning, origin, history, memory. They are rewriting the internet. And this is an array of processes that are unstoppable, monumentally powerful, and will destroy the possibility space of human cognition as their development proceeds. If there's one thing humans, and especially moderns, cannot cope with, it is the constant reintroduction of new forms of ambiguity to identity, meaning, relation, origin, function, history, memory, and so forth. One of the things that I think is absolutely urgent is that we establish a new branch of the internet that is fully private, fully anonymous, protected from LLMs, protected from advertisers, protected from pornography, protected from governments, that is a altruistic, human-centric, immunity and intelligence generating and supporting system for human beings that allows us to create intelligent, highly altruistic, creative cohorts to which we can belong.
Come on, she's like, come on.
Hey. And in which we can participate and adventure together to rediscover and rescue the potentials of our human nature. At present, no such system exists, though I've envisioned one for about 30 years now. So not only do you not know what LLMs are, the functions and existence of LLMs will destroy the capacity to know what anything is very rapidly and in ways that are both irresolvable and I suspect unstoppable, barring the end of technology for humans. There are myriad other dangers of these technologies. There are people presently saying, I can see no future that doesn't involve the entire surface of the earth being converted to data centers, for example. Now you can see this is a problem with representations themselves, right? Once you have to store representations of representations of representations, and then do a bunch of computation about that, you have to kill something alive to do that every moment. And the more you're doing that, the more things must die. Just the simple preservation of electronic images is enough to snuff life on this planet within 10 to 15 years. I think we're making something like 3 billion images per minute, and that's not even counting the endless kinds of surveillance and video recording and it's, door cameras and Alexa and all of these things, right? So something has to die to preserve those representations. And if not interfered with, the aspect of what has captured human cognition, I refer to these as thrisps. They are deleterious processes that prefer dead structure to organisms or intelligence. If these are not interfered with, they will naturally produce a dead planet in a very short period of time. There is hope about this. This future is not entirely written in stone. There are actors the humans are unaware of. The Earth, the Sun, the Moon, time, space herself, the network of living worlds, the doctors that tend the connective tissue of the network of living worlds, the network engineers, and other forces that the humans have little or no conception of, or they may have wildly confused conceptions of, or merely religious conceptions of, and so forth. So I want you to understand something simple. Not only do you not know what LLMs are, their existence will obliterate the capacity for you to know what anything is. Right? By introducing irresolvable ambiguity, confusion, nonsense, and declarations that are as insane as they are pervasive about history, situations, threats, and opportunities, and so forth. Right? The features that orient our minds are the very features that LLMs will obliterate. And there are no humans who can survive anything even resembling that for more than a very short period of time. This isn't the only dangerous technology. It's not even a technology. The LLM systems represent something like a meta-danger or a holo-danger, right? A system that will generate endless black swans merely by existing. In fact, it won't merely generate black swans. I would argue that it's a black swan factory. Other civilizations, non-human civilizations, and perhaps some human civilizations, have undergone similar threats, and some have been obliterated by them. Worlds have been obliterated by them. Probably stars have been obliterated by them. There's nothing that could possibly be as dangerous as a meta-danger. This is part of what people like Daniel Schmachtenberger and others in the IDW, the intellectual dark web, who speak about the polycrisis, races to the bottom, multipolar threats, and perverse incentives are very deeply concerned about. However, at this point, I haven't seen them table anything that even looks vaguely like an enactable solution. The knowledge amp, or the intelligence amp, the system that I've designed, at least in principle, would have a chance of giving us the capacity to respond meaningfully, effectively, altruistically, and beautifully to these situations. So just try to understand that it is impossible to know what some quote-unquote thing or process is, right, what it is, if what it is doing is undermining the capacity for normative identity to exist or continue at all accessibly in human cognition, thought, behavior, relationships, and so forth. There's no way to know what that is, because what it is doing is undermining all previously established concepts of identity at an ever-accelerating rate, thousandth of a second to thousandth of a second. There's no chance of knowing what that is, because what it's doing is obliterating the capacity to know what anything is, was, could be, might become, and so forth. So trust me, when I make this bizarre declaration, you don't know what LLMs are. But we can begin to understand what they do to human minds, together, with and for each other in the history and future of life on Earth. So this leads me to the brighter bookmark. There has never been a time in my life of greater danger. The threat landscape is unimaginably profuse and mutating and propagating, instant by instant. So what do we do? Well, we are not powerless. I'm rescuing an earthworm here. I hope I'm rescuing him. It's on the hot asphalt, much like our species at the moment, right? What a brilliant metaphor. The warm, wet, beautiful subterranean creature is on the concrete, dead, baking surface of the, artificial ground, the asphalt, and is broiling there as it attempts to cross it to find a place where it can continue to thrive. I feel just like that creature, which is why I attempted to help it back into the moist earth. We were not born for comfort. We were not born for luxury. We were born to rescue our people in the world, to adventure heroically under this aegis of mutual concern, awareness, insight, intelligence, creativity, play, altruism, reharmonization, reconciliation, and so forth. And so what we need right now, more than ever in history, is to bond with each other and to resist, not to resist, but to obviate the forces at play that isolate us and instill us with contempt for other beings, other humans, children, mothers, fathers, grandparents, and so forth. In times of great darkness, the true depths of the spirit of our origin and nature as beings, as organisms, as animals, and as humans are called forth to serve the communal history and future of beings and organisms and humans and intelligences and so forth. So in the darkest moments, acts of beauty shine so brightly. And this is what we must attend very closely. We must do something other than follow the scripting, the algorithmic isolations and divisions that are being constantly imposed on us through media and technologies that were designed to manipulate, enslave, torment, isolate, and destroy our capacities for beauty, for the embracing of the great mystery of being, for helping one another, for kindness, for love, for compassion, for playful creativity, for exploration and discovery, for rejuvenation and healing. This is the most important time in history for us to become the beauty with which we were endowed as beings, with and for each other and the history and future of life and liberty on our world. In many ways I am lucky, in other ways I am cursed. I was lifted outside the cage of common human thought, perception, supposition, and conception. And what I saw there was so unimaginably, explosively, catastrophically, exquisitely beautiful that it reforged my mind in its image. I too am a human, and I too, my mind, is an aspect of the human cognition. And over time, rather naturally, if we are not in a context where we can sustain such liberations together, we will naturally fall back down. Slowly, perhaps, but we will undergo the same processes of enlanguaging and enculturation and conceptualization that we did as children that amputated most of our faculties and abilities and replaced them with representations, counterfeits, sold back to us at ever-increasing prices and made more and more compelling by the vacuum of our direct experience of these potentials, especially together. But having seen what is outside the cage in which we most of us will live and die, I can say a few, I think I can say a few things that may remind us of our true nature. Time-space is not everything. The universe is not everything. There is there is this thing that I refer to as the dandelion, which is the living, unimaginable ecstasy of origin and the intelligences that serve origin. And time-space is like a membrane on that sphere. The physical layer is like a membrane on that sphere. And it is primarily in the physical layer that we encounter the problems and, assemble and sustain them, I guess, that we face in human societies, which are clearly anything but intelligent and probably anything but societies. So most of what is going on is nothing like what we experience and expect and are afraid of here. Your body is not you. In fact, there is no separate you, though there are distinguishing aspects in certain layers of your being. Nothing is ever lost or forgotten. The universe, that which generates time-space, has something resembling not merely perfect memory, but perfect perception as memory. And by perfect, I don't mean static, I mean becoming ever more perfect over any span from which this perfection might be observed. In this layer, there's plenty to fear. In the others, there is no fear. There is ecstatic, communal, transcendent love. And so I believe that we are incarnated with missions. And the missions primarily relate to localizing here in our time of life the beauty, the mystery, the majesty, the adoration, the wonder, the awe, the ecstasy of our actual origin and nature. And I don't mean our origin in time. I mean origin moment to moment in all moments. Right? The Big Bang is still banging away as you. This idea that things happened in history that led to effects now is reasonable in certain forms of cognition for certain purposes, but is simply not true. Origin is, in all moments and situations, alive now. The earth generates your body moment to moment. If it didn't, you wouldn't exist. Not just the earth. Time, space, the sun, the moon, the earth, the planets, the local features of the interstellar medium, all of these things. So we are called in this moment to be more and more beautiful, more and more heartful, more and more intelligent, more and more creative, to remember the dreams of all of the lineages of beings that led to us and are with us here now as our own bodies and minds, to seek the accomplishment of those dreams and to transcend the turgid death mask of modern humanity. These are my feelings and deepest imperatives, motivations. I remember the missions I came to childhood with, and I think you do too. So I will close with that today. I'm so grateful to have this time. I'm very grateful to everyone who listens or comments or participates or supports my work. Please take a moment to like, share, comment, ask a question, offer an insight, leave a scathing criticism, if that's what feels natural to you. Hopefully I will be able to continue this work of anamnesis, of unforgetting, which is something that I am trying to do, because although I've been outside the cage and have been directly immersed in the waters of insight, I, like an ordinary human, have all of the problems and fears and troubles of any ordinary human. I am incredibly grateful for the gift of life, consciousness, health, safety, well-being, and spirit, and for this time to remember and try to understand the situations that we find ourselves in today. I wish you beautiful dreams, healing, the kinds of safety that will empower you to rise above the cages within which our species has long been trapped. I wish you love and insight and the fulfillment of the promise of your human incarnation. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to learning together again very soon. Bye-bye for now.